Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I did an introduction yesterday, but now I want to do a pre-introduction because of things that happened, and just talk about how technology really doesn't save time. Um, like I think about the time that I've wasted on technology, and one of the big reasons is they're constantly trying to improve and update things. And so two things happened to me yesterday. I had two experiences that were basically back to back that um, that show what I'm talking about. Illustrate my point here. So I made a mistake yesterday or the day before when I put up my video, the one the latest video that was featuring Kennedy and this guy Meta, whatever his name is, Meta Hassan from MSNBC, and all of it. And I did a voiceover. I've been doing these voiceovers here. This what somebody called a monologue, where I tape it here where I can edit it in real time, and then I have to listen to it again, as opposed to my ScreenFlow where I'll talk during the ScreenFlow using the ScreenFlow app, and then I have to go through it and edit it. And so I put the voiceover in twice, and people pointed out to me, which is a real bummer. But YouTube has an application that they have an editing application for videos. And they have a trimming feature, which I've used, I use occasionally there. Once in a while, like I have a clip at the end of the video that I forget to delete before making the video, so the video will end. But then the people will be like, oh, the video's, there's like there's dead air for a little bit. And then the clip that I put at the end of the video will be there. So I can edit that out, right, and get rid of it. And so I, left a comment telling people what happened when I read, a couple of comments saying that I repeated a voiceover. And I gave them the timing of it, and I went and did the editing process. And I look back, it takes a while for the editing thing to work, the editor. And I came back, and the video was supposed to be, it was an hour and 50 minutes, and now it's supposed to be like an hour and 40, it was like 11-minute clip that was edited out. So I looked for the video, and I wanted to see if it was successful so I could take down the comment, because now the comment was irrelevant. And they had gotten rid of everything but the 11-minute clip I wanted to edit out. They had changed it a little bit, and I was a little unsure how to use it. It was changed in some way. But now they've changed it to do the opposite of what it used to do. That you had a bracket, and you put the bracket around the part you wanted to edit out. And now the bracket was what you wanted to save. And I'm like, why would they do that? Like, why would you upgrade something to make it, permanently do something that, was, it was a nightmare, right? And so, I had to go and take the old video, the original video, and edit it on my end and re-upload it. And I got slow internet. I had slow internet yesterday, and it took forever to get it back up. And so that was a big hassle. And so while that was going on, so I'm already frustrated, right? Because it's just a waste of time. The amount of time I wasted when I had a Microsoft computer as opposed to having an Apple computer is, I can't even explain the differences. And those of you who have switched or have, these kind of issues, especially to do with the video stuff, the video applications, they work so much better on Apple. Like, just computer needing to be restarted, losing stuff, not rendering, just all these things. Like yesterday, my microphone wasn't working with the ScreenFlow app a little bit. And that was kind of a bummer because I had to redo the voiceover. But I can't tell you the amount of times when I had a Microsoft computer, how many times I had to redo things and things were lost or they corrupted or whatever it was. And so, I'm grateful, because that always was, a big motivational killer was when, you have glitch outs in your computer. And so then my wife was doing some work. She was organizing some stuff. And I was making dinner, and I was waiting for her to get done. And I was looking at the TV, and I had tried to open HBO Max, and, and they had changed it to Max, right? And they changed their app from HBO Max to Max. And so when I opened the app, the TV had said, it no longer exists. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have to reinstall this app, right? Instead of just switching HBO Max to Max. And, they've been sending me emails about it and, things like that, right? Now it's Max instead of HBO Max. And it's the same crappy, content. Like, same age, HBO makes good quality content. I shouldn't say that. But, we've been watching it on, I have Direct TV, and when you have HBO, you get the app for free. And so I went to download the app on my TV, and it said I had to log in. And I briefly remember doing this before. Somehow I'd been logged out. And I knew that, and I remembered that I was frustrated with it because when I went to look up the password and the information, there were some swear words and hostility expressed in the password, right? So I know I was pissed at the TV company for making me to log in so they could get more of my information. I think they sent me a couple of emails before I unsubscribed from them, all that stuff they do, right? So then it took me a while to log in, download the app, and put the app where I could use it, right? And that took me a certain amount of time. And then I went back on and I found out that, my video was delayed getting uploaded because there was some kind of glitch out with the internet and it had just been sitting there like not uploading. And so I wasn't going to get it done till the night, so I'm wasting all this time, right? And I'm like, how is this better? Like, how is this, evolution? Like, and part of the problem here was they upgraded things. HBO upgraded their app to Max. And HBO Max made more sense to me because I can't remember what Max is. And now I'm getting like emails from Max. And I'm thinking it's Max some person, right? It's just stupid. And like, it's the same thing. It's not any different. It's not any better. And they could have just upgraded their app. Maybe people weren't using it or whatever. But they screwed me, right? Like, it's a free service that, it's a, time waster. And now I'm, frustrated with them. And then, this thing with the editor, video editor. Now I have to figure out how to use this new video editor. And all of you who are in the middle of watching that video and then it just disappeared, like, I don't even know what happened on your end. And so it's just, it shows you what technology is, right? Because you still waste time. It's not like your life is more convenient or whatever else, right? It isn't like it's so much better because you're constantly having to relearn to do something with all the so-called improvements and updates. And you think about like when you couldn't watch videos on the internet, like when they first put out YouTube. Like, I had a dial-up modem. People were getting high-speed internet, but I had a dial-up modem, and you had to buffer the video, and it would buffer for a little bit. You get to watch the video, but the buffering speed was slower than watching the video, so it would stop and buffer. And it took like 20 minutes to watch a 10-minute video. It was like, oh my God, I can watch videos on the internet now, right? And now they have all these streaming apps where you can actually stream content, but now they have all these free apps that run commercials, and everyone's got a plus, right? Disney Plus and ESPN Plus and HBO Max. Like, they all got their apps, and of course Netflix and Hulu, and then all these smaller ones. And, and it takes forever to switch between apps. And I can't remember where that show is available and this one is. You have to look up and find out where you can watch this on what app and this app and that, And I'm, kind of wishing it would go back to the way it was when we had 3 channels when I was a kid, right? You had limited content. Cable came in, and now, and ultimately you're just wasting time doing all these things, right? Like, it's just a way to kill time. Like, you're not, there's very little value in the content you're watching out there. And it keeps you disconnected from your life. And so you think, oh, wow, everything's faster and better and it's more improved. And now it's clearer. The quality of the content you're watching is clearer and high definition and whatever it might be. But it's not. Like, you're wasting your whole life away, right? Like, you're not doing things out in the real world. And it's oftentimes frustrating. The things break down, they glitch out, they have to restart them, whatever. Even on your TV is a computer now, and it has to be restarted, and things glitch out, or the internet doesn't work, or you record something, there's thunderstorm, and you miss chunks of it, like, and so, like it's not better. Like it seems like it's better, but it's not, right? Growing up, when I grew up and the kind of lives that we used to live and that were much more, enjoyable and they were like, these kids they don't get excited about things, right? They're so desensitized by being overstimulated. They go to the Grand Canyon, they're like, oh, what's this? It's not as clear as you'd see it in high def, and it's better to experience it at home, and it's not a video game or whatever. But it's just it's quality of life has gone down, is what I'm saying, in pretty much every possible way. And it seems like it's gotten better, but it's not. Like it's it wastes your life, it wastes your time away, and you spend a lot of time dealing with things that are not working the way they should, or figuring out how they worked, or adjusting to the changes in the this new thing that they've put out, and for nothing, right? Like it's just I used to like the way the YouTube app used to work, the YouTube app on my computer, and they changed it so many different times, a new format, a new way of interacting, an interface format, and I was happy with the first one. It could have went on forever. Like they didn't need to change it, and now this thing with the editor, right? Like why are you changing it? And now I have to watch, you watch a video from 2 years ago and tells you how to use it, but then it's like, well, no, it's been updated, and then you have to find a more recent video. It's all these things, right? So it's just an indication of we've gotten weaker, and our vocabulary and our inability to live life, and each generation's getting softer and weaker and less healthy, and the negative effects of the internet. I mean, all of it. It's just a mess. All right, let's go to my other introduction that I did yesterday. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I did a couple of comments to the Kennedy thing. I was talking to my wife about it as well. Yesterday, I made a bonus video. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to make this another Kennedy video. I've made a few in a row now. I want to get to a bunch of these other subjects and headlines I have up here. So, knowing your fate, knowing the future, being able to see the future, or hearing a prophecy or hearing a prediction doesn't preclude you from doing the work that you need to do. You understand what I'm saying here? That if you were someone who could see into the future, or in the case of people who do the Sizemore system, there are all these prophecies about what's going to happen. But until it happens, you still have to live your life. And you might as well live your life every day up until the day you die, right? Like, there's one guarantee for all of us, and that's that we're going to die. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't live, right? We shouldn't try. We shouldn't, put effort into whatever we're doing. And so if you do know prophecies, it's like the Noah's Ark type of thing. Let's say and you can see that the system's failing, and it's going to fail sometime in the near future. Most of us will see it, in at least one phase of it, and the collapse of the system, and that there are going to be changes. The changes are already upon us. We can see the collapse, the apocalypse, right? But the system's still going on now, and we have to participate in it to whatever that means. We have to do our duties. We have to fulfill our responsibilities. We have to, do whatever we think we're supposed to do. We got to figure out what God wants us to do and do it. And sometimes you just have to put your intention in something, even if it doesn't work out now. It might work out in a future life, or in the future of your soul's evolution or whatever. Doing the right thing, even if you're doomed to fail, even if you're going up against insurmountable odds. If you feel that you should do something, you should do it, right? Now, the thing with Kennedy, not only do I believe the system is going to collapse, the system won't allow for change. The system is too far gone and too corrupt. On a so selfish level, I don't want the system to collapse. But on a spiritual level, I know it's what's best for us and everybody. On a soul level, it's better for everybody and everything. The sooner the system collapses. People seem to be worried about getting duped by Kennedy. What's the worst thing he's going to do is come out as a pro boop, right? Booper. He's going to come out as a pro booper, and he's going to actually say, I conned you guys, and now I'm going to make it mandatory. I mean, that's where it's headed anyway, right? But if somebody is willing to verbalize our positions, and again, we're not going to agree with everything he says, especially the big ones. The biggest one, which he has a history of fighting, the biggest one right now is mandatory boopers, right? That's like the biggest thing up right now, because that, will be coming with the other one. They're saying there's going to be another one, Bill Gates and the rest of them. And so if that's what's heading for us all, and you have one person who's clearly against that, you have two presidents, former presidents, maybe running against each other. Trump, who keeps on bragging about Operation Warp Speed, and he's clearly for it, and he got worked on before, and Joe Biden, who said it's a pandemic of the young boopinated, right? So, we know how they stand on these things, right? Everyone knows that they're, going to do what they're going to do in terms of like sticking with the big pharma. And he's one candidate out of everybody who's against it. And that's, worth supporting him just for that, right? Like, that's how I view these things. I may or may not vote, but Kennedy is just different, right? And even though I think he's doomed to fail, and maybe in a tragic way, and it might be, upsetting or a bummer if, you're going to root for him like you're rooting for a team, and it's going to suck when it goes tits up, right? Like, I mean, it's just, it's going to be bad. I said this to my wife. You're getting vested in it. You're going to be bummed out. But getting hurt by things is life, right? Getting disappointed is life. Like, you have to sometimes back a failing effort, or whatever, just because it's the right thing to do. The system is, it's not just doomed. Its expiration date is up, right? It's run its course, and it's for the best, and it's planned obsolescence. It's already written in the the stars, so to speak, and so that's going to happen. But we still have to live our life. Consciousness of what's going on, the ability to see in the future. Like, let's say the date of your own death. That could be a great thing or a horrible thing, depending on your what you do with that information. And so it's what you do with it, like Noah's Ark and these things. You have to make reasonable decisions, and they have to come from a place of sanity. You just can't run off into the forest, neglect your children, your responsibilities and things because you think the world is going to end. You have to still play out your role, play out your part, whatever that is, right? And you have to support what needs to be supported. And Kennedy verbalizes the truther positions. Like, I saw a number of comments where people saying, well, he got exposed here, he got exposed there. The worst case scenario is he becomes a Trump or a Biden, right? Like, he's not going to be any worse than those guys. You have nothing to lose. He's not taking your virginity, right? Like, it's just, I mean, we all know what's going to happen. But for me, like, I see a difference in him. And so I'm, going to support him as much as I can, whatever that means. And if he lets us down, whatever, like they all do, I just expect people to let us down or fail. Like, I don't think, I think more that he's more likely to fail than anything else, to come up short or whatever. See, people say ignorance is bliss, and in one way that's true. True ignorance, where if you are so unprejudiced and so innocent like a baby, but so connected to God. This was Babaji, the second master of the Saj Marg system of meditation, where God tells you in every instance what to do or what to think. And then you would be a blank slate and see the world through God's eyes and relying on God to inform you and show you what you needed. That's like divine ignorance. It's a high level of spiritual development, where you don't have any, your own thoughts, your own judgments, your own prejudices, your own point of view. You just go into every experience open to, God to show you what you need to know. You're not going from memory. You're going from God's, inspiration, from God's deep connection with you. It's an evolved state. So there's a way that there is a divine ignorance. And there's ways that sometimes you're better off knowing. You'll be happier if you don't know things. If it's all going to end up the same and you can't control or change anything, And sometimes knowing what's going to happen is just, it takes it takes the fun out of it. It's like somebody ruins a movie for you and tells you the ending. But even if you know the ending, you could be watching a movie. I've done this and I've talked about this recently, where something historical is happening and we know what happens in history, and yet it's still stressful watching it because they do a good job of developing the plot lines and getting you invested in the storylines. And so, like, that's kind of what's happening here. You still have to, play the game, even though the outcome is predetermined to whatever extent. And you have to figure out what your role is. And I don't care if people vote for Kennedy or not, or support him or whatever. And if he loses, the primary, if he loses the general election, or he loses and they off him, whatever might happen. That's just going to be what it is. Like, I'm not expecting anything less. Like, it's a degraded time, and, I just expect to be disappointed, and usually am, right? I mean, that's, the time we live in. But like I said yesterday, I feel like Kennedy is the first truther candidate who, through his actions of being an environmental lawyer and getting some of the toxins and poisons out of our environmental system, like, he did quality work there, and he did quality work with the booops, right? The stuff to do with autism, and he went after these things he litigated these things and was successful to some extent. So that means to me that he actually is sincere. It's beyond just words. But people aren't cultivating the truther vote. Trump did it a little bit. Like, he flirted with the truthers on the side, like on the down low. Like, he went on Alex Jones, and he, Steve Bannon had him say a few things here. Like he said, I don't know who the QBs are, but, he said some positive things about their beliefs. And the QBs took that, like, just as a, there's a movie I just saw, like I saw when I was in, like, college or something. I forget the name, it doesn't matter, but I just watched a little bit. I was, like, looking through the channels. I was like, oh, I'd see that movie in years. And this guy made a bet with his friend that he could get 3 women who were, whatever. One was married, the other 2 were, whatever. They were hard to get to marry him. So he got it on video, each one of them being engaged to them or something. And the part that I saw, which I remembered, was like he was a weatherman on the news, and he said to each of the women that he'd give a signal, like he'd tug on his ear or he'd do something to indicate he was thinking of them, right? And, when they were watching him on the news, he'd do something and they would, whatever. But, like, that's what Trump did to the QBs. Trumper has said a few truther-friendly things, where Kennedy is a truther in his own way. And, that is whatever it is. He's the first truther candidate. And, there's good things about it. Because let's say he gets 40, 50% of the support. That means half of America believes what he's saying. Even if he gets 45, that's almost, 50% of Americans are against some of these policies, right? Any Kennedy support is a validation for the truth community as a voting bloc, and it might be there's 60% of people out there that are somewhat truthers, truther-friendly, truther-adjacent. And so if he was to win, and even if they whacked him or whatever, it would indicate the power and the movement that's happened in America. It would be a significant movement. That's why they're trying to suppress and, and deplatform everybody who's talking about these things and hide them and shadow ban them and all these things, because their movement's growing. And Kennedy could be the face of that movement, whatever. And, just representing, like, the good part, the intellectual part, the part can, verbalize things in a reasonable, rational way. And if he gets more and more support, even 40%, 30% is a lot in terms of, the size of this country. Like, 30% is over 100 million people. And so, that's a win for the truth community. Anything that he accomplishes is a win for all of us. As opposed to Alex Jones, who acted like a crazy person and became the profile that the left and Trump, to whatever extent too, and the Trumpers and the QBs who became the profile that they wanted to use, like of crazy, right-wing nut job people who are, who are semi-racist and all these things. Like they became that. They acted that out, right? Unstable, people who were, some level of psychological issues and things like this, right? And then, they acted in a way that they fed into that profile. They were doing the work of the enemy, right? They were on the enemy's team. But you really can't say that about Kennedy. He's very reasonable. He's very well spoken. He doesn't get emotional. He doesn't get triggered. He's a excellent debater, and even though with his the disease that took his voice or whatever, he can still get the words out and is able to do whatever he's got to do to make that possible. But again, if you have some imaginary standard, you're waiting for a truther candidate like that, I didn't think we'd ever get one that represented the truth community in a good way. And he's good at it, right? That's why they don't use his clips. Everything that comes out of Trump's mouth, they put on CNN and MSNBC and they mock him, right? And, he feeds into their narrative. But they don't do that with Kennedy, and they won't do that. And they have, a problem with Kennedy. Because he comes from an iconic family that suffered tragedy, and his dad and his uncle were assassinated, and they've had so much tragedy in their family, and there's just they're pillars of the Democratic Party, and they can't smear him like they did Trump. They can't use some of the arguments against him. And he already has support of the Democrats, and they're Republicans. They're Republicans that voted in some of these southern states voted for JFK. So it wasn't like this, that he could cross lines here. He has a huge demographic of truthers and right-wing people and people who are on the left and Bernie Sanders people, and he's putting together a coalition of voters, and it's a lot harder for them to smear him as some crazy right-wing whatever it is, right? Conspiracy theorists or any of these other things, because of all this different support. And they risk alienating people in their own party. People who will turn on the Democratic Party, either want a third party or, leave altogether. He could destroy the Democratic Party. Like it's set up for that, right? Especially if they have to cheat him and they have to rig it. And they're already starting to rig it with that North Carolina, with that New Hampshire primary. He presents a lot more problems for the Democrats than, Trump does or any of these other people, because he's one of their own. He's not like some new Democrat. He's a part of their, their history, right? One of their best presidents, one of their, their big stars. And then, Bobby and JFK were huge for the hippie movement, all these people. And it'd be hard for them to, many of them are into alternative health, and, they lost their minds a little bit with their anti-Trump focus, and they endorse Biden on some of these things like war and some of these things that they are against. But, he's got two positions. One, he wants to immediately end the war and the support of the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian military, and bring peace to that region and reconnect with Russia and avoid World War III. Like, that's one of his positions. And another one is he wants to make sure that the booops never become mandatory. So if they try to do another one, if they tried to do another pandemic, he would be against that. So just for those two issues, even if he doesn't come close to winning, he should get our support, as whatever that means, because, we have one candidate that's willing to stand up and say, this is part of my platform, that there's no mandatory what's, and, the bloops, and there's no war with Ukraine and Russia, World War III. Those are the two biggest things on the table right now. It'd be hard for them to run out another one of these pandemics on him and run some of these other games that they're able to do on Trump and Biden. Anyways, I just wanted to start off this video with that. Let's get into these other subjects here. Okay, let's get into it. This is Ari Meebla. It's Meebla. He's got the obelisk behind him here, and this isn't how it works out, right? The White House, here's the obelisk, and here's where the White House would be. So this is, but he looks a little bit stunned here. I got a bunch of videos. I just want to get through some of them, like some part of them. And I got a bunch of like headlines I want to get to, which is a different type of video. A little bit of JRFK thing, one video to do with that, but the rest is things have been sitting up here for a while. Let's start here.
And even though he has gone on a long, long road trying to win over Trump, and we'll get into some of that, just watch as this crowd unleashes before Graham even speaks.
Thank you. Welcome to Pickens. Thank y'all for coming. Thank you very much.
Just giving them thumbs down. Look at this woman. She's giving them the thumbs down.
Thank you. Welcome to Pickens County. A little bit about this county. Just calm down for a second.
So Lindsey Graham is getting booed by Trump supporters. So Lindsey Graham ran against Trump in 2000, and let's get that woman thumbsing him down here. Ran against Trump in 2016, right? There's the thumbs down. And, the primary. And Lindsey Graham criticized Trump mildly. And Trump was the front runner, and no one took him seriously. And so Trump had gotten Lindsey Graham's personal number. Lindsey Graham had given him his personal number to, whatever, because he wanted Trump money. I mean, this is whatever it was. And Trump gave out his personal number, which is a huge dick move, right? Just a horrible thing to do. He gave out Lindsey Graham's personal number. And Lindsey Graham had this commercial. I've showed it before. I don't have time to do it here. But you can find it. It's an ad where he's putting his phone in a blender, where he's hitting his phone with a golf club. That was his reaction to Trump giving out his personal number, right? Was to destroy all these phones. It was the stupidest thing. And then when Trump won, he bowed before Trump, even though he had been sort of critical of him, and tried to win Trump. I mean, just disgustingly groveling like a golem before Trump, right? And even after that, in his home state where he's been a senator forever, he is being booed by Trump supporters. This is, he hasn't groveled enough, right? He's at a Trump rally trying to, get Trump. Trump's a piece of, fish boy, whatever. Trump's over. And the Trumpers are still not, in his home state, are still not allowing this guy, some sense of dignity. I mean, he's supposed to be there, getting people to vote for Trump, and he's being booed off stage. So this is him with Fareed Zakaria, and was asked about the cluster bombs.
And it was a very difficult decision on my part. And by the way, I discussed this with our allies, discussed this with our friends up on the Hill. And we're in a situation where Ukraine continues to be brutally attacked across the board by munitions, by these cluster munitions that have dud rates that are very, very low, very high, that are a danger to civilians, number one. Number two, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. The ammunition that is...
we've given them $111 billion. There was a Kennedy speech where he talked about the CDC has a budget of $16 billion, right? So you have, needs that American people have. There's poverty. There's, all kinds of issues we have, right? And they're giving away money to this war to do regime change, which we know doesn't work. We know regime change doesn't work. We've seen it in Libya. We've seen it in Iraq. We see it in Iran years ago. I talked about this a little bit on my other channel yesterday. Regime change is a failed policy. And it's none of our business. We shouldn't be dictating. This is where we're an evil empire. We dictate, and this is not a Democrat problem. This is traditionally Republicans were the war hawks. So this is a bipartisan issue that, an intelligence community issue. We're going in and taking out a leader we don't like hurts the people of the country, first of all, and it's their country. It's their sovereign country. We have no business going in there and doing that, right? And that's what they're trying to do with Russia. And, you know, by supplying these arms, they're affecting this outcome. You know, this is what happened in Afghanistan years ago. America supplied the Afghanis with arms and made the Russians, you know, this is what brought down the Soviet Union, the war in Afghanistan, because they propped up the Afghanistan army and Russia went bankrupt trying to win that war. Afghanistan's a place where empires go to die. Alexander the Great, I mean, all these empires have been, for whatever reason, Afghan is just a place that after an empire enters into it, and we're the most recent empire, opposing force, that opposing force collapses. It's happened over and over again. America's in the process now ourselves. And so trying to get rid of Putin, who's to say you're not going to get somebody worse, somebody who's more willing to push the button or whatever it might be. And it's going to starve and kill children in the country, economic sanctions. And so we shouldn't be doing this, right? It's a failed policy. We know what happens. It isn't like we don't know what's happened because we've done it before in numerous countries. In every country, it's backfired.
They call them 155 millimeter weapons. This is a war relating to munitions and the running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it. And so what I finally...
So what happens if we have to fight China? Right? You know, we're low on it. You've given all these weapons and munitions that American taxpayers have paid to for this, you know, country that, I mean, Americans don't even know about because we don't know things about foreign countries. And because you want to fight a war with the Soviets, or you want to depose Putin through some, you know, proxy war.
We took the recommendation of the Defense Department to not permanently, but to allow for, in this transition period where we get more 155 weapons, these shells for the Ukrainians, to provide them with something that has a very low dud rate. It's about I think it's 150, which is the least likely to be blowing, and it's not used in civilian areas. They're trying to get through those trenches and then stop those tanks from rolling. And so, but it was not an easy decision, and we're not signatories to that.
It's not an easy decision because it's a war crime, right? You know, if it was the right thing to do, it'd be an easy decision. To say it's not an easy decision, it means it's the wrong decision. You just feel like you're forced to do it. Because if it's an easy decision, if it was what God wanted, if it was what your heart wanted, you would make that decision, right? As if it's something that was backed by your divinity and your soul, you know, it's a bad decision because you're going to hurt people. You're giving away weapons that shouldn't even exist. That's going to hurt civilians. And that, you know, your press secretary says it's a war crime. And because you're, you know, more immoral piece of crap that has already droned children in Afghanistan. That
agreement, but it took me a while to be convinced to do it. But the main thing is they either have the weapons to...
He had to be convinced to do this because it's the wrong thing. You don't have to be convinced to do the right thing, right? Unless it's something where you're sacrificing yourself, and that's not the case here. This is hurting other people. This Deliverance boy, MNF, he looks more and more like that kid from Deliverance. What's going on here? It's just like this guy he's just so jumped the shark.
Stop the Russians now keep them from stopping the Ukrainian offensive through these areas, or they don't, and I think they needed them.
So this is the other piece here. This sad sack MNF for Jake Tappers. I don't know who she is, but she probably sucks. And we can just assume she sucks because she's sitting on CNN.
Ukraine's potential membership in NATO will also be top of mind as President Biden prepares to head overseas for a NATO summit next week. CNN's Fareed Zakaria just sat down with President Biden for an exclusive interview and asked him about Ukraine wanting to join NATO very much. Take a listen.
When you go to the NATO summit, the big strategic
He's got a bull here, or bison.
Issue is that Ukraine wants membership in NATO. Should it get membership in NATO?
I don't think it's ready for membership in NATO, but here's the deal.
So this is the thing. the whole reason the Russians are invading is because they don't want a, foreign occupying force. If you listen to Kennedy's speech on this, or Kennedy's take on this, and something that I said early on, that, this was something that I knew, but he was talking about historically, Russia lost 1 in 7 people in World War II, and then all the, issues they've had since then with America putting missiles on their borders, right? Which, we didn't want when Russia tried to do it with Cuba. There's a whole Cuban missile crisis. You remember that, right? And so nobody wants missiles on their border. And if Ukraine becomes part of NATO, they'll be able to put these munitions, these missiles on. Russia will be at risk. So much so that they're willing to go nuclear on this thing. I mean, they've basically said that Ukraine isn't going to be part of NATO. Plus, if they ever invade Ukraine like they're doing now, if the Ukraine does things to Russia, and Russia has to retaliate, then that's World War III, because NATO, including America, would be at war with Russia, because you go against one of these countries, America has to fight you, right? This is the price we had to pay for the world reserve currency being the American dollar. And so this whole thing has been about the Ukraine joining NATO and what a hero Zelensky is, and now he's saying they're not ready to join. Like this is just incompetent diplomacy here. They're trying to, have it both ways, right? Like the whole reason for this war is the Ukraine going and being part of NATO.
Deal. I spent, as you know, a great deal of time trying to hold NATO together because I believe Putin has had an overwhelming objective from the time he launched 185,000 troops in Ukraine, and that was to break NATO. He was confident, in my view, and many of the intelligence community, he was confident he could break NATO.
Okay, this is just not good here. Like, that's just not good here. So anyways, that's JoJo Magoo. We have another little clip of him and a kid. It's kind of, I think, doctored, but it's creepy anyway. I'll show you that at the end here. Okay, so I just want to add a little voiceover here. I'm in the editing process. I've completed the rest of this video. My wife and I went out to get some stuff for our farm projects. And I had an internet issue, and my wife and I were talking about how much time we spent dealing with the modern conveniences that are supposed to save us time, right? And it's, what I said in the beginning of this video. And we were listening to the Lex Friedman interview with RFK, and Lex Friedman did a good job. Like, I saw him briefly. The only other time I saw him was interviewing Kanye, and I took an immediate dislike to the guy. But he did a good job with the RFK interview. And there's a section around 35 minutes, 40 minutes into the video where he's talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it is a bunch of reveal stuff. And it's, better coming from him. I'm just going to give you a synopsis of it. But he's, telling the story. He's growing up as I think he was like 14 or 15 when JFK was assassinated. So I don't know, he's like, 13 or whatever he was, right? And he has a vivid memory of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he said that his dad was the Attorney General. His dad, Bobby Kennedy, was the Attorney General. And he was going to school at some Catholic school in Washington, D.C. area. They lived in Virginia. He and his brother were pulled out of school, and they were going to be taken to a secret underground city in Virginia. Like, this is confirmation, all these secret military bases that they had, right? Underground military base, because the Cuban Missile Crisis was, basically on the cusp of nuclear war. And his father, he's talked about how, and this happened, it was kind of being phased out when I was a kid. I got a little of this, but it was already on its way out. But, when he was going to school, they would teach you to put your head under the desk. And, when there was a nuclear missile. And the glass would be shattered, and so you were supposed to protect yourself from the windows being the classroom being shattered, and then you're supposed to calmly march into the basement where they had a supply of dehydrated foods, and you would spend 6 to 8 months in the basement waiting for the radiation to subside, the radiation levels to go down, and you could go outside again, right? And he said that this was a psychological operation to make you believe you could survive a nuclear blast, right? Like, it wasn't going to happen. In fact, they went to these underground bunkers, but even then, and his father, Bobby Kennedy, said he was regretted taking part in this because he later realized it was a psychological operation to make you think that you could survive, to make you think it was okay. And, it wasn't. And so, if you guys remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Russians put missiles into Cuba, and, America wasn't going to have any of that, right? And so the war hawks wanted Kennedy to bomb the crap out of Cuba and Castro. And Kennedy had a dialogue with Khrushchev, and apparently they had private conversations because Khrushchev had his own war hawks. So the first letter Khrushchev wrote, was a conciliatory letter. And then he wrote a very, sort of inflammatory letter second, because his war hawks didn't like how weak and soft his first letter sounded. And so, they all have handlers and they have their military personnel. And so JFK and RFK, they decided to respond just to his first letter. And the deal was, America had just put missiles into like Turkey and, I don't know, Poland or something like this. And JFK made a deal with Khrushchev saying, you take the missiles out of Cuba, and in 6 months we'll take the missiles out of, these other places, Poland or Turkey and these other places. But if you tell anybody or if it comes out as public, the deal's off, right? And so Khrushchev took his missiles out and Kennedy took his missiles out, and they prevented World War III. But he said that we were this close to nuclear war because the war hawks, and, if Nixon had been president, he didn't say this, but you can imagine if Nixon had been president and he had bombed Cuba, then it would have been World War III. And the reason was they had the 30th anniversary in Cuba of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And some of the soldiers of Russia returned there, and it came out that each one of them had, every soldier had the right to launch the warheads that were already preloaded. So they were ready to go. So when they got the warheads down in Cuba, the missiles down, they were ready to be launched. And if they were attacked, they were told to launch the missiles. And so if Kennedy had ordered a bombing of Cuba, at least one missile had been launched. And they knew it would happen. It was going to be 30 million dead Americans and 120 dead Russians. That would be the result. And JFK, RFK said that JFK called these guys the military brass. He had a nickname for them. And he said they didn't care how many Americans and Russians would die because after the missile crisis, they would be in command. It would be a military-based run America. Same thing in Russia. The military would seize control, and there would no longer be any sort of politicians or democracy. So for them, they didn't care. They didn't care how many Americans had to die. And they were pushing for nuclear war. And so if you understand that, what's going on now with the Ukraine, he talked quite a bit about the Ukraine as well. And he said that the Ukrainians are running out of soldiers. The chance of them winning is like Mexico defeating the United States in war. Like he said, the Ukrainians are so overmatched. Putin only put a small amount of his forces on the ground, despite what the news is telling you. In the beginning, he thought he was going to the negotiating table, so he didn't, even put much effort into the military going over there. He said that Putin, then went over there, and they have just such an advantage. It's 7 Ukrainians dying for every 1 Russian, and the Russians are, they're all behind Putin. There's like 70% approval of the war, and they see where this thing is going. And so there's no chance for the Ukrainians to win. There never was. And Zelensky ran as a peace president. That's why he won the presidency, because the Ukrainians wanted peace. But then he was put in this position by the West. And, I said this is a giant money laundering scheme. That's, to me, the only legitimate explanation, because he's got more support, Putin does, and they're going to win this thing. Like, it's already over. And the Ukrainians have nothing left, right? They've run out of, munitions, which Biden just admitted to, and, all of this. And Kennedy said they just keep on lying to you, right? They just, lie to you over and over again. The Wagner, the guy Prigozhin, or whatever his name is, didn't have, only a few thousand of his troops, of his 20,000 troops, decided to defect with him. And he didn't have, the Russia wasn't threatened, Putin wasn't threatened, but the media keeps on saying Putin is weakened and all these things. But the war in Ukraine is over. It's only the West that's propping this thing up. And they're suffering because of it, right? They're being used as a pawn for what I can only consider a money laundering scheme. And the last thing is, my wife was talking to one of her Democratic friends about Kennedy, and the person said, well, he's being backed by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who to me is, she's so stupid, I can't believe she's not a shill. I think AOC and her are actresses, because I can't believe they're both that stupid, right? AOC is the liberal version of Marjorie Taylor Greene and MTG, and MTG is the conservative version of AOC, right? And they're just a disaster. Her backing Kennedy, everything, these people who are, and Trump is in this category, who are provoking other people on purpose, that's good if everything's, gone to a complete war between the two sides, which is the left and the right. But, until that happens, and when that happens, your lifestyle is going to change dramatically. I got caught between dramatically and drastically. And so, that's just a disaster, right? You have to understand whether you're going to help or not. And she's clearly not helping, because, Kennedy needs some Democratic and liberal support, and Marjorie Taylor Greene will, kill that, right? And so, whatever. I've heard this a couple times, going back to this nuclear war thing. We have been on the fringe or cusp of nuclear war a number of times. And there's people who are in power on both sides who want it. And, it's predicted in the Whispers of the Brighter World prophecies, the Sajmark prophecies I've talked about. And so for me, it's just right there. And maybe it's what needs to happen. Maybe it's got to happen. Maybe there's no avoiding it, which I kind of think maybe that's probably, I don't know. I like to think that there's, some chance of it not happening, but, whatever. But I do know if you can participate in anything that would stop it, right? Like Kennedy says, if he doesn't stop these wars and these health problems, the issues with health care, that you shouldn't vote for him for a second term. That's something he's, campaigning on delivering on. And, we'll get to it. So they talk about it here. So one of the MSNBC, guests, one of their experts, completely owns herself. They keep on owning themselves here. And it's a great meme. Let me show you that. So this is about what RFK Jr.'s anti-boop administration could look like. And then here's the warning here for the CDC. Here we go. Okay, wait, let's go back there where it was. Titanic, Hunter, Trump. She's got... This is a person named Haley Jackson. They do this thing now on CNN too, where they're standing in front of the camera. They've rolled out a new policy where they don't sit behind a desk. They're doing a lot more standing in front of you. I want to show you at CNN. I just haven't had the time. It's hilarious. And some of the people are, obese. And, when they're sitting behind the desk is a little bit different, but now it's much more obvious, right? So, anyways.
Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. Tonight, We're talking Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Democratic candidate for president out in New Hampshire tonight. He's set to talk about what his foreign policy platform would look like. And if you recognize his name, it might be because you know him as a member of the Kennedy family, one of the country's most famous political families. His uncle, President John F. Kennedy, his father, a U.S. Attorney General and New York Senator. RFK Jr. is also an environmental lawyer who helped lead the push to clean up the Hudson and New York City watershed. But today,
what is she?
he's also known as a vaccine skeptic, a leader in the anti-vax movement. And you can see where he is in the polls. Joe Biden, obviously, with that very healthy 70% lead. RFK right there at 17%, with some interest from voters on both.
There's a lot of time here, right? Like I said, this time last year, he's really over 20%. And that's just with Democrats. This is Democratic primary polling. They're asking registered Democrats. And so Kennedy has a lot of independents and a lot of people on the right that would vote for him. And so he has 17% of Democrats right now. And many don't even know he's running. And so, Marianne Williamson, who sucks, has got 8%. So, how would you think she's better than he is, right? The other thing that I didn't mention in the introduction is that Kennedy stands with people or for impassioned issues, people who have impassioned issues. Like there's a lot of Democrats that are green Democrats. Their number one thing is the environment, right? And he's big on that. Then there's a lot of people on the left and the right, more on the right, and in the truth community, that their number one issue is the boop, right? And so I got it back. I lost it. I was having trouble doing it yesterday. But he has, a lot of people are one issue voters. Or he agrees with you on just a couple of things, but it's a wide demographic. It's a wide net of people. Some very liberal, some very conservative. And so as this thing plays out, and this is why they're, because of his name, because he isn't as easily to demonize as Trump was, and because JoJo Biden is melting down right in front of our eyes, they got a real issue here. Like this guy can easily win the primary. If, like he's using the internet too, and they can't control the narratives anymore. Like this woman's trying to control the narrative here. But she gets no views, right? Like he's getting millions upon millions of views on the internet as he goes to these various shows and things. And it's free publicity. He doesn't have to spend much money. It's a more organic grassroots campaign. And, them trying to control it is hilarious.
Both the right and left, which is why we're taking a look at what an RFK Jr. administration could look like, straight from the candidate himself, in a new interview with NBC's own Brandy Zadrozny. Here's what he would do, right? He would make childhood vaccines go through basically constant safety studies, even bigger.
Wait, he wants to have safety studies? How dare he? Constant safety studies. Well, how dare he?
Clinical trials. He would gut agencies like the FDA, NIH, CDC. He would ask the Justice Department to investigate.
Well, like that doesn't sound like a bad idea to lots of people.
The editors of medical journals for, quote, lying to the public. Brandy is joining us now. Brandy, thank you so much for being here. This segment is all about kind of behind the scenes and how
Hey, Brandy.
How this piece comes together. You took a hike with Robert
Take a hike, Brandy.
F. Kennedy Jr. out in California. We just showed some of the pictures there. You have written that it was like a decade in the making. You've asked for interviews with him before. He has turned you down. There are some complaints that maybe from, I think, people on the left that he gets too much airtime here. He is a presidential candidate. Can you talk through your thought process here, making the request for the interview, why you felt it was important to tell this story here?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Holly. I love this segment. I first reached out to RFK, as I've done many times.
I think I covered her before. Didn't she do something else? Didn't she interview? Is this a person that interviewed the nurse that passed out? And she has a blog. Is that the same person? I'm not sure. Maybe it's somebody different. But there's somebody who had a blog, and she covered the nurse that passed out. And yeah, here it is, right? In an NBC News podcast, Truthers, Tiffany Dover is dead. Brandy Zadrozny followed a story of a nurse who became an unwilling icon. So this is her thing, right? So she's the anti-boop the anti-boopers, like that's what she does. This is her thing. This is her bit. This is what she specializes on. That she goes after anti-boopers. She's like a shill for this.
Before, and he has said no many times before. But I reached out to him because I was watching his campaign and listening to his kickoff speech, and I was looking at his website, and suddenly I didn't see the word vaccines anywhere. And that's like basically the president of Ford Motor Company coming out and not saying the word car. So it was like, what's happening here? What's going on? And it seemed to me that he was trying to make himself more palatable, that this was a strategic move, because Democrats do really love vaccines generally, polling among
people on the left used to not. The most people that were anti-boopers, she like she's got all these little kid books here. The people who are into alternative health, that go to Whole Foods and take various herbs and things, there was more of them that were anti-boopers than of Republicans, right? So I don't know what's happened because of Trump or whatever, but everyone's being polarized. But there is lots of people on the left who are into alternative medicine. In fact, alternative medicine came from the left and the hippie movement and organics and things. And so it's a weird thing, right? That they're more likely to use alternative medicines, but then they all came to they bowed before the pharmaceutical companies here.
Democrats shows that they think vaccines are safe and effective. So it's kind of hard to run for president in the Democratic ticket when you don't align with your party in that way. So he's not saying it as much. So I reached out, and I was really surprised that he said yes. And even in a sort of strange setting, I said, yes, I'll be on the hike. So, I went. And I think I hear that a lot, right? Like, we shouldn't give him attention. We shouldn't platform him. That's crazy. We've passed.
It's crazy because you don't have a platform. You don't have viewership. Like, you don't have a platform anymore. You have a platform for older people who are the undesired demographic. They're not from 18 to 55 or whatever, which is a desired demographic. You have almost none of them. People get their news from the internet. And so you make it sound like putting it out here is some big favor that you do, right? You guys don't have a platform. And just let me add this, because, I'm in the editing process here. And it's not their job to decide what the news is, what news is allowed, what people should be censored and deplatformed. It's supposed to be a free press. And not only do they want to deplatform Kennedy and, whoever it is, all of us from the mainstream news, but they want to deplatform us on social media. They have advocated for restrictions in our ability to express ourselves and say what we believe. And that's nobody's job, right? They can do it because it's private companies. But if you're a journalist, that's not your job. Your job is to report what's going on. And it's up to the people. We're supposed to have a democracy, and we're supposed to have a public education system. And if people are so stupid and don't have the ability, so easily manipulated, then you're screwed anyway, right? They're saying that people are just basically they're incapable of making up their own minds. And, this is something Mika said, right? I'm not going to show you. We've showed you that meme so much. That's our job. It isn't Trump's job to tell people what to think. It's our job. And if they think their job is to tell you what to think, and they suck, right? But that means they know that what they're saying is lies, and they can't tell you the truth, and they have no confidence in America and an American system and American people, which they shouldn't, because there's a lot of dopes out there. We all know it, right? And so they're basically admitting that the population is worthless and democracy is a joke because people are too stupid to have one and too low consciousness. And they're right. And they just, they won't say it that way, but it's the truth. You can't rely on people because people don't have the ability to discern. People don't have the ability to see how they're being manipulated. They don't, know how to control their emotions, and they have trouble seeing the truth. And this is across the board. And so all of this is purposeless, because once people are that low in their functioning, and that easily to deceive and that stupid and low consciousness, then your society is screwed because you have idiocracy, and that's what we have.
The point where it's an option to ignore this man, I think we passed it years ago, because whether you like it or not, Kennedy is here and people are listening to him. He was just on Joe Rogan's podcast last week where it reached millions of people. He was trending all weekend long, right? And so, our job isn't to gatekeep as journalists.
Oh my God, that's exactly your job. You guys, your job is totally to gatekeep.
I think everybody should go listen to that Joe Rogan show, actually. Our job is to explain and add context and, to explain the stakes.
See, this is the other reason why I think the Kennedy candidacy, because he verbalizes truther narratives, and he might not do the best job, or he might not agree with you or me or whatever every time, but people are hearing them, and America can, decide one way or another. He's a more legitimate person, well-educated, part of a prestigious family. When he says it, it's more legitimized, right? And, again, America has to make a choice. And I think they're going to choose wrong because Americans are weak and stupid and pathetic and idiocracy and all those things have said it. I don't think Americans have the capability to choose the right thing. And even if they did, I'm breaking in here because I'm saying the same thing I just said. I added that little voiceover just a second ago, and here I go saying that. That's how it even works. I mean, I'm not even aware what I said the thing before, right? The powers that be will rig it and fix it anyway, right? But you have to let things run its course, and support things that are, despite the outcome, you do what you have to do in terms of checking the boxes. Even if we're all doomed, in terms of the systemic collapse.
And ask tough questions that make those stakes really clear. And we've seen what the anti-vaccine movement can do. Millions of lives lost to COVID, eradicated diseases like polio and measles coming back. So I feel like we ignore him at our own peril.
I was struck by so many details from your stories, Brandy, but one of them that a university researcher texted you, #Gamma, give America measles again, when you asked about what an RFK presidency or candidacy would look like here because of sort of where he is in the vaccine skeptic movement. You talk about, holding truth to power in some ways, trying to combat misinformation. You did that a little bit in this hike. And when you talk about this in this hike/interview, going back and forth with him about what's true, what's not, about COVID and vaccines and everything else. And at one point you write that the conversation felt unsettling to you. Explain that.
I think that I talk to a lot of conspiracy theorists, right? And, internet addled people, and I consider...
She talks a lot of conspiracy theorists. She does, and it's so disturbing.
Kennedy Jr. to be both of those things. But, what's unsettling about it is, again, I've covered this man for a decade. And when you go to these anti-vaccine marches, you see hundreds and thousands of people who are just enamored with him, right? They believe whatever he says, especially women who for decades in the anti-vaccine movement have just hung on his every word and taken everything that he said as gospel. He's done a lot of real harm. So I've never met him before. So, being side by side with him and asking him these questions, what sort of struck me is that he really believes all of these things. There's a delusion there. And,
he really believes them. So that's for those of you who, she was upset because she really believes them, right? Let's go back to that here.
Combat misinformation. You did that a little bit in this hike. And when you talk about this in this hike/interview, going back and forth with him about what's true, what's not, about COVID and vaccines and everything else. And at one point you write that the conversation felt unsettling to you. Explain that.
So she said it's unsettling to you. And the reason for that, she says it right here.
And at one point you write that the conversation felt unsettling to you. Explain that.
What sort of struck me is that he really believes all of these things.
So what's unsettling to her is somebody believes in what they're saying, right? What's unsettling to this, blogger internet person that goes out and tries to debunk conspiracy theories and slam anti-boopers is that the politician actually believes in what they're saying to, the people they're supposed to vote. He's not faking it. He's not lying about it. It's unsettling. He actually believes in what he's saying. I couldn't believe it. He's not BSing his constituents. He's not lying to the sheeple. He's actually believing in what he's saying here. I can't believe he believes in what he's saying. I mean, oh my God, this guy believes. He believes in his rhetoric. I can't believe it. It's unsettling. I had a panic attack. I'm like, this guy really believes it. He believes what he talks about.
Delusion there, and I think that's a little dangerous. I let myself for a second imagine what he would do as president, and just like you said, he's got those agencies. He would not prioritize vaccines for the next pandemic, which will happen. He'll investigate scientists and medical journals,
Oh my God, that there would be some sort of oversight and there'd be some sort of, what is it? They refer to it in the Constitution. Checks and balances. He'd apply checks and balances to a system run amok. He'd rein in the whole, the religion of science. He'd do all those things. He'd actually do these things. Look at that.
Odds are low that he's going to win, but the stakes are really high, and I could really feel that on the mountain.
I'd rather have this guy, this senile guy that, poofs into Penn's diapers and gropes and snoozles women, and he doesn't believe a word of what he says, and he puts cluster bombs out there, and he's run the country into the ground, and he's trying to provoke World War III with Russia. I'd rather have that guy, because that guy doesn't believe in anything that he says. But Kennedy does, so I don't know what to do. I mean, this guy, we got this great president now who just is a complete puppet, and he just rolls out and he does whatever he's told, and he's running the country into the ground. And or even Trump would be better than the guy who, Trump will lie to his constituents and set them up and then bail on them and, be all about himself. But this guy actually believes, and he might actually do some changes, and it's real unsettling.
Brandy Zadrozny, thank you so much for sort of pulling back the curtain and giving us a sense of your thought process as
Pulling back the curtain. That's a truther term.
you went about this profile. Folks,
See, this is another truther thing where this woman's an internet blogger who they've brought in. She's anti-truther, but they're using the same kind of, terminology and the same perspective as what's won in the truth community, but you guys still suck. You guys are just wannabes. You hate us because you ain't us.
you can read it on NBCnews.com. Brandy, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Go take a hike, Brandy. Okay, so that took a lot more time than I had anticipated. There's a bunch of other videos I want to get to, but I'm going to get to the headlines in a moment, and then I'll get to those videos next time. And I have 2 more clips to show you, though. So this is I want to revisit this part with Christie, and I got a thing about Christie somewhere talking about how they don't like these fake politicians. I forget the terminology he said, right? But he's a fake politician saying. But this is him talking about Trump being the cheapest man. I covered this last couple videos ago.
Cashed in on those relationships when he left the office. So what Donald Trump's doing now is just a continuation of what he's permitted his family to do over the entire course of his time as president.
Why do you think he's not using his own money to pay for his legal fees?
Because he's the cheapest person I've ever met in my life. That's why. And what he's very good at, Caitlin, is spending other people's money. And if you look at his history in New Jersey,
and you think he's misleading his voters, his supporters by...
Well, I think those supporters, write a check to Trump for president. They think they're paying for campaign expenses, not for personal legal expenses. What happened?
So, this is a guy who knew Trump. And, I believe Trump to be cheap. That's everything I know about him. And I've heard about people's stories about him and these things. And if he's cheap, he's selfish, right? If he's a billionaire and he expects you to pick up the tab for lunch, he's selfish, right? And he thinks that, he's better than you in some way, and that all you hardworking Americans who are giving him money, he's entitled to that, right? For his greatness and because of his work as president, even though he's a complete, failure and a piece of crap, right? So that's Fish Boy. So I believe this to be doctored here.
How to take all these pictures? Yeah. You're good. Let me whisper a secret. Don't tell Mommy what I told you.
My wife had said this as well. She thought that the sniffing is edited in. And if he said that, don't tell mommy I told you. Again, the world of deep fake, whatever it is. But he said that before. Don't tell your mom or your parents. He said that, he whispers things in the kids' ears all the time. And he says, don't tell your parents. And when an adult does that, that's what pedos do, right? Like, if adult says to your kids, and you should teach your kids this, don't tell your parents, then you should definitely tell your parents. Like an adult should never, and so someone like the president should never say something to a kid and say, hey, don't tell your parents, right? Like, it's just, again, this is a little bit fake. I don't know, whatever. But it's believable. The sniffing is believable, but it seems fake. I don't know. Overseas payments to Biden family could exceed $40 million, Colmer says. That this is organized crime. And to all you Trumpers and Republicans, Trump and Jared Kushner walked away with $1 billion from the Saudi Arabians. And so, yeah, Biden and his son are corrupt, but so is your guy. Amy Schumer roasts sociopath Hilaria Baldwin, fake heritage, Von Trapp amount of kids. And so she made a joke about her on the internet, and they had met. And she said she felt bad about it. Sad dumpling. This is the sad dumpling here. But she is now going in on it, right? And so they're just never escaping this thing. So apparently she doesn't feel bad anymore for Hilaria. Man attempts to R woman on New York City subway in Lower Manhattan. That speaks for itself. After initially crying inaccurate, Biden administration confirms China has had a base in Cuba since at least 2019. So that, you can listen to this guy here.
Accurate. What is the extent? Is there a new listening post in Cuba that affects the United States?
Yeah, so I've seen that reporting. I can tell you based on the information that we have that is not accurate, that we are not aware of China and Cuba developing any type of spy station. Separately, I would say that the relationship...
See, what's happened here is China has gone about giving money to countries and helping countries build things and winning countries over that way. And America's just pissing everybody off with the arrogance and the other stuff. And so, now it's been confirmed that they have a base over there right at our, border, 50 miles off our coast. Britney Spears' lawyer claims reckless report that singer is on meth is false and defamatory. This is before she got slapped by a security guard for acting like a meth head. Fangirl. There he is here. King Charles III includes Prince Harry Father's Day tribute despite feud. He's often said that Prince Harry isn't his son. Hunter Biden was at Joe Delaware's home. Joe's Delaware home. I'm having trouble with the plurality. The same day he used his dad as leverage in the Chinese BizTech's laptop photo reveal. So he said that his dad was right there, that whole leaked laptop thing, and he was at his home when that happened. And so there they are together with a couple of, there he is in his dad Corvette Stingray with a couple of hookers. Suddenly, liberal media aren't so keen to blare whistleblower charges. This is all to do with this has to do with the IRS agents who were, putting out this stuff to do with Hunter Biden because there was a cover-up and their investigation was compromised and pressured to, do whatever. And now the left-wing media is saying, the same thing happened with Obama. Obama was one of the hardest people on whistleblowers. Democrats warn the threat of Trump winning 2024 is very real. Well, JoJo Biden isn't going to make it. I don't think he'll make it to the election. I thought that before. So, but they're going to have a candidate, right? And so, and it isn't going to be Kamala. Heroic IRS whistleblower testimony ensnarls Hunter and Joe Biden in bribery scheme.
Miranda Devine is a columnist for the New York Post. She joins us now. Miranda, you are the foremost authority on all things Hunter Biden. What surprised you most about this whistleblower testimony?
Look, I think just that there's such a volume of information confirming and corroborating what we have known at the New York Post for almost 3 years. And anybody, Tony Bobolinsky, for instance, all the information that he's given to the FBI and has said publicly, that's also been here validated. And
Tony Bobolinsky was the guy that Tucker Carlson interviewed. And so, now he's fired by Fox.
I guess really just seeing it all in one place, it's
See, this is another huge blow because they covered this up before the election before, but now it's going to be a scandal and it's, and who knows when the indictment charges are going to come or, there's a Republican House and all these things. Like Joe Biden isn't going to be able to be president again. I mean, it just depends on how Weekend at Bernie's tolerant people are. Like, they're rolling out a corpse who can't even articulate anything. He's getting older and older. He's done a bad job as president. And you have a viable candidate in Kennedy. You still have Trump out there, and the Republicans are activated, and they're pissed, and they're ready to go. And the Democrats have been pacified, and they're divided, and all these other things. And so, it's just, there isn't a real good pathway to victory for Biden.
Polished the lies that you just played of all those people who pretended it was Russian disinformation, including Joe Biden. Joe Biden knew.
Shaking her head. Anyways. Senator John Fetterman gets dismal marks from Pennsylvania voters. And so it says here, found that 50% of the key swing voters disapprove of Fetterman's job performance, while 39% approve. 39% of people in Pennsylvania approve of Fetterman. Like, that's the bigger story. And 10% said they had no opinion. So about half the people, only half the people are sane in the state. Those are probably, but who knows if those people voted for Oz, because he sucked too. It's just a mess. Republicans demand DOJ let Hunter Biden prosecutor testify about alleged cover-up. Covered that before. IRS agents who said that there was, that they downplayed or they sabotaged the case against him. U.S. says Iran tried to seize 2 oil tankers, fired on one. So that's happening, right? A war with Iran at this particular time is, would be devastating. America can't do that because, and with China, America's very vulnerable now. Ukraine and Russia are warning about imminent attacks on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Should the world be worried? Of course you should, because that radiation fallout goes all over the world. When Chernobyl happened, they found radioactivity in England. It's, and then it's bad for, of course you should be worried. Lab confirms White House substance found at the White House is cocaine. There's a great question that was asked of the press secretary. I was going to cover that today, but I'll get to that next time. Well, I guess maybe I'll squeeze that one in because it's short. Battle of Timelines. Meta launches Threads as an alternative to Twitter. The headline here was that Elon should look out for Meta. People hate Meta. They're not into the metaverse. They don't like Zuckerberg. And, they're not going to... There's lots of Twitter-like platforms out there. They make it sound like everyone's going to bail on Twitter for this this Threads, and they're just not, right? Like, they're not going to bail for Zuckerberg. There's other options. If they want to leave Twitter, there's other options, right? There's these two guys. Remember them? Okay, so let's end with this. Karine Jean-Pierre.
Hi. I'm wondering if you have any comment about recent crime in D.C. It's raising rates. We've lost an SIV applicant from Afghanistan in the most recent killings. Really tragic. Wondering what the White House has to say about that. And then secondly, sorry to bring up cocaine again, but there was a question yesterday during the press gaggle with Andrew Bates that was, I guess, he said that he was avoiding it because of the Hatch Act. I'm just asking again, can we just say once and for all whether or not the cocaine belonged to the Biden family?
So,
Kaboom! That was a long way to go to say, is it Hunter's?
A couple of things there. He mentioned the Hatch Act because the question was posed to him using Donald Trump, and so he was trying to be very mindful. Okay, I hear you, but you're asking me a question, so I'm answering it for you. And so that's why he said the Hatch Act. So I would, have you read the transcript and read the transcript fully so you can see exactly what he was trying to say. So that's number one. So we're not avoiding the question. That is not true. We've answered this question, litigated this question for the last 2 days exhaustively. There has been some irresponsible reporting about the family, and so I got to call that out here. And I have been very clear. I was clear 2 days ago when talking about this over and over again as I was being asked a question. As you know, and media outlets reported this, the Biden family was not here. They were not here. They were at Camp David. They were not here Friday. They were not here Saturday. They were not here Sunday. They were not even here Monday. They came back on Tuesday. So to ask that question is actually incredibly irresponsible. And
Seriously? Incredibly irresponsible. The president's son is a crackhead. He's been in and out of rehab 8 or 9 times. And so he's dropped laptops in the tub like a handful of times. At least we know 3 or 4 times. And we know, and who knows how many times he's done it before that. He drops his laptops in tubs, right? I mean, think about how important your computer is and your phone. And this guy just drops them in tubs and then takes a laptop charged with, crimes and inappropriate material and, drug addict, drops them off at places and forgets them there, right? And so if he was at the White House, he totally could have left cocaine there, right? I'm not saying it's Hunter's because, I believe that, like she's saying, hey, there's plenty of people using cocaine at the White House. That's inappropriate to even suggest it might be the families. And that's just Hunter. Do you think that there isn't an addiction problem? Their father is creepy and weird with kids and girls and women and all these things. That there is an addiction gene in the Biden family, that they're not, family of alcoholics and drug addicts. Like Hunter's the only one. And so any number of them could have left the cocaine there, right? I mean, it's just such a stupid,
actually incredibly irresponsible. And I'll just leave it there.
I'll just leave it there. Just like Hunter left his cocaine in the White House. Just like that. So let's end here on that note. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.